Good afternoon, and welcome to the Mission Critical Insight series, where we showcase experienced leaders' perspectives on the current and future critical infrastructure security landscape. Mission Critical is a vendor-agnostic, objective, and nonpartisan nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between academia, industry, and government to develop research that improves critical infrastructure security and resilience. I am Joyce Hunter, Mission Critical's Executive Director for Education and Collaboration. Any opinions or views expressed in this Critical Insights interviews are those of the individual and are neither reflective nor representative of their organization. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Chief Cathy Lanier, whose experience spans from protecting the President of the United States as the first female police chief in Washington, D.C., to overseeing security for some of the largest events in the world at the NFL. Welcome, Chief Lanier.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
So let's start with the increasing overlap between physical security and cybersecurity. How do you ensure that both areas are integrated effectively to protect high-profile events and organizations like the NFL?
I fought hard to integrate cybersecurity with physical security when I got here. It's just so important because security is security, period, end of story. Our goal is to make sure that we have a safe and secure environment for all things related to the NFL. And I'm not sure how people still are doing those things separately. I think the integration is critical. One, I bring a ton of technology to the way we do our security, right? So those security technologies have, grown exponentially in the past decade and continue to grow at a very quick pace. So the security systems that we use, the technology that we use, we want to make sure as we continue to add layers and layers and layers of security throughout all of our business elements, that we realize we are expanding an attack surface. All of those are additional things that can be vulnerable. And are we making sure that we are putting guardrails? Security is not just guards, gates, and guns. It is putting guardrails around all of those things. We secure everything from the air, the infrastructure below the ground, all around us in a 360-degree circle, and that includes cyber. So integrating those teams has been really critical to me. I'm not sure how people are still doing it as two separate things.
Interesting. And in fact, you mentioned above the ground and in the air. So in a recent interview, you highlighted a dramatic rise in drone-related incidents from just 12 in 2017 to over 2,800. I just can't believe that number, 2,800 in 2023. What measures can or should be implemented to safeguard critical infrastructure and mass sporting events from the growing threat of suspicious drone activity?
So we have been pushing for many years now, common sense, bipartisan legislation that would allow for the authorities to mitigate, and I'll clarify that in a second, authorities to mitigate this threat from drones over our games. So our games have a temporary flight restriction. So every single game the NFL plays, because we are considered, one, part of critical infrastructure, two, we have 70 to 80,000 people in a large mass gathering in our open air stadiums. We get a temporary flight restriction that restricts the airspace over our stadiums on game days. So therefore, drones that cross into our airspace are violating federal law when they enter our airspace. So once they enter our airspace, they are violating the law. So that's a game changer, right? So we currently have technology that we deploy and we use that allows us to detect, track, and locate. So we can detect the drone coming into our airspace. We can track it, get some basic information on that drone, and hopefully try and locate that operator and ask the operator to bring the drone down so that it's not posing a threat inside that stadium. But as you know, that's not going to be effective if this is a nefarious operator. This is why the mitigation technology, which is currently not authorized for use for anybody other than 4 federal agencies, DOD, DOE, DHS, and DOJ, so the FBI and DHS in our circumstances, can deploy this technology, but in a very limited circumstance, and they have very limited resources. So what we're asking is that this legislation get passed so that authority to mitigate, so when a drone does violate the law, comes into our airspace and poses a threat to that 70 to 80,000 people, the state and local law enforcement authorities can use the technology to bring that drone back down to the ground outside of that threat environment.
That's great. And there's a lot of public partnerships that play in that, right?
Yes.
So that you can address the unique challenges of securing large scale events. Take, for example, the Super Bowl. What advice will you give to organizations looking to enhance the public, private, state, local, federal government partnerships and relationships?
I mean, I have always found that the federal government wants to be a partner. They want to support critical infrastructure in particular, regardless of what infrastructure you're in. They want to be partners. They want to help. From DHS to FBI, the two primary partners. There are a lot of easy ways to go about doing that. DHS CISA has a lot of different partnerships that they offer and services that they offer. You know, like they have their protective services officers out there, and they now have another person assigned to each region that can support private critical infrastructure on the cybersecurity side. They can set up tabletop exercises, joint private public partnership, tabletop exercises. I think the key thing is get to know that person. Who's your PSA? Who's your regional CISA assigned cyber person? Have somebody from your team make contact, build that relationship, and then do some joint planning exercises, share your best practices, learn from that advisor. I think those are all basic principles. It's just good collaboration and good partnership, just like you would do when you're, you know, government to government or private sector to private sector.
Do you do the same thing when you have your overseas games?
Oh, absolutely. We can't carry out our games and our events without the support of the government. So the first meetings we have, the very first, is with the government and the cities that are bidding to have these games come. We sit down with the government organizations team, transportation, public safety, regulatory agencies. You know, all of those are key partners before we even think about starting to plan the game itself. So it's been a real whirlwind with the broad expansion to the international games now, playing in places outside of just the UK, you know, Germany, Brazil. It's been really incredible.
Yeah, that was exciting to have Brazil. And I'm not going to ask you who's on the cusp for the next one because you can't tell me. But I'm looking forward to seeing what the next city is that's going to reveal itself in the next.
Nothing's off the
months.
table.
Yeah. So, as a leader in public safety and security, what are the most significant challenges that you face? I mean, there's so many, particularly with big events like especially when you combine the football game with a concert afterwards. I mean, that's just massive amounts of people. So, how have you leveraged innovation to address those kinds of challenges?
Well, we're in the entertainment business, period, right? And I think people think of the games in a silo. And, you know, take the draft, for example, even the draft, which is really evolved to a 3-day mass entertainment event. We had 775,000 people come to draft in Detroit. We had 600,000 people at draft in Nashville in 2019. So these are very large events that bring a lot of people, and there's concerts each day. A-list talent. There's watch parties that go on alongside games at stadiums and adjacent properties all the time. So we are in the entertainment business. So I think the biggest challenges really are that we're constantly on the move. You know, each year Super Bowl's in a different city. Each year draft is in a different city. Along with those, you know, cornerstone tentpole events like the Super Bowl, there's 10 days of events over 25 or so different venues. And so my problem solving skills are constantly working overtime. It is new venue, new challenges, new environment, new threats. So it's a constant challenge, which is exciting, but it gives us an opportunity to stay on our toes and work through innovation. Technology for me has always been the first analysis I do. What are the technologies that we have? How are we deploying them? Are there new ways to look at the new challenges that we're facing? Each new venue, each new location gives us new challenges. What are the technologies that can help me solve that?
And I guess you don't get a off season, do you?
No, there's no such thing. I mean, if you think about it, the Super Bowl's in February. Immediately after the Super Bowl, there's combine, draft being
Oh, yeah.
almost as large as Super Bowl anymore. So it's Super Bowl,
Wow.
it's Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, draft, combine, and then we go into the training camps and then, back into
So it just
preseason.
starts all over again.
Yes.
I was, there used to be a time, I guess, when you used to have at least a couple of weeks after the end of the Super Bowl, but not even
We
that.
used
You
to
just,
we used to get a little bit of time in July. That's,
mm,
right after the training camps, mini camps,
yeah.
training camps. But, now with the international planning, we are constantly scouting and traveling for the international games. So there's definitely no break. I mean, I just uh, saw our, travel schedule for the upcoming year, and there's no white space on the calendar.
Oh my gosh. Well, creating a culture of cooperation, communication, and collaboration in a federated environment. I remember when I was the deputy CIO and then the interim CIO at the Department of Agriculture that had 100,000 people and 27 agency staff offices and mission areas with 27 different CIOs. So I empathize with all of the things that you have to do because it's a federated environment and it can be incredibly challenging, especially when you have to manage diverse teams and stakeholders. What strategies have you found to be most effective in fostering alignment and shared purpose among all of these owners and everybody else representing their autonomy?
It is the same principles that I have always believed in from my policing days to now. When it comes to safety and security, there key elements that is transparency and trust, right? And you don't get transparency and trust without good communication. So it is a matter of, even if you're the one that's responsible for setting standards and enforcing those standards and then compliance of those standards, you can build those standards, you can build a culture where those standards are evaluated and adjusted through a collaborative process, build subcommittees, have those engage the stakeholders and get their input, talk through those changes that you're proposing or changes that you'd like to propose, get the feedback from those that have to implement those changes in advance. So you know what the challenges are, and maybe you can tweak the way you're writing your policy and doing things. But really, again, you're not going to be safe and secure if you don't have a collaborative relationship, one, a transparency with your stakeholders, two, and three, you have to have trust, and people are not going to trust you if you've not engaged in good communication, been transparent, and built that environment of trust.
Well, great. You're a great example of that because you don't hear any noise outside of the NFL about,
There's sometimes noise.
well, they don't make it well known.
Yes,
That's right
yes.
now. So, you know, one thing that has bothered me over the last since COVID is that we're seeing more women drop out than really, get
Yeah.
into cybersecurity. And recruiting and retaining women in these security roles remains a challenge across all industries, it seems. What what have you found to be most effective for attracting and supporting women in public safety and cybersecurity?
I felt both in both industries, public sector and private sector, security and in cyber, to recruit and retain more women, it has to be a holistic approach. You can't just, oh, I'm going to have women on my recruiting poster, or, it is starting out with outreach programs to young girls, right?
Yeah.
Partnerships with schools and STEM programs, innovative, improving workplace culture to make sure that we're more inclusive and supportive of the women that are in our workplace culture, offering mentorships and leadership opportunities for people in the organization. These are the efforts that can improve not only retention, but can help you attract more women into your environment. So sometimes you've got to do a little extra work. Sometimes I go
Mhm.
out and look to recruit women because it is still tough. I have to tell you,
Yeah.
it's very tough. Even
Yeah.
as a woman in charge, we still have far fewer women applicants, and we sometimes have to go out and find them.
That's just true. And I guess the teasing on that thread, organizations, like you said, they can't have just the obligatory person on the poster. and they say, we want you, we're recruiting you. So how can they basic include, make women feel more comfortable and enhance the decision making and problem solving within organizations?
I think some of those same principles, all right? I think, I try and stay engaged in mentoring programs for women, both inside my organization and out. We have a women's network here at the league, and I try and, participate in that so we can have a strong relationship with the women across the league, but also in mentoring young women that are not in, even in this discipline, but mentoring young women outside the organization to try and build a pipeline of women to come into the organization, right? So letting people know that we do have a strong organization and a strong support for women and, diversity in the NFL. So it's really my job to make sure that we are constantly and making those investments so that we can bring that diversity and make people feel comfortable that it's okay to come here and work here.
Great. What are some key lessons that you've learned from overseeing security for high profile events that other organizations can apply to their own risk management strategies?
Well, it's all about reducing risk, right? That's all we can do is, do a really, really good job of evaluating your environment, looking at the intelligence, identify what those risks are, and then try and reduce those risks. Plan for the worst and adapt for the unexpected. Two big principles for me. Plan for the worst always. Have a plan what you're going to do when the worst does happen, because you can do everything right and bad things are still going to happen. And when they happen, there's nothing worse than bad things happening and you don't have a plan because you thought your plan was going to stop the bad things from happening. So plan for the worst and adapt for the unexpected. Secondly, I would say prioritize training and communication, right? Making sure everybody on your team understands the dynamics of the plan, understands how to execute the plan, not just the successful plan, that when the plan goes wrong, what their role is and how they're gonna do it. And then it's rehearse, review, and refine. It's important for me, after every large event, we do an after action process and we are pretty critical of ourselves. I've never come out of an event and didn't have multiple pages of after action feedback, and all of our after action reporting is tell me where the problem was and make a recommendation for a solution. So again, that goes back to rehearse, review, and refine. We tabletop exercise, we drill, we do live events, and then we come back and look at ourselves. And once we do an after action, we prepare a corrective action plan. It's very easy to do an after action report and say, here's 25 things we identified that were wrong, and then stick that on the shelf. And then next year, do the same event and have the 25 same things come up. You need a corrective action plan that identifies all of those solutions and assigns those solutions to somebody to implement, and then close out that corrective action plan at the end. So when you go into each new event, you're going in with a clean slate.
And that's all a part of resilience, right? A lot of people,
Yes.
like you said, do a lot of prevention, but they don't do the resilience part. So what happens if the bottom falls out?
Well, that's
And
really critical in cybersecurity, right?
yes, absolutely.
That's the big vulnerability in cybersecurity. People, even as people start to come on board with a strong cyber hygiene, where they often drop off is that solid business continuity. Have they made the plans, first of all, to segment and protect data, but the plan to mitigate and restore, and to make sure that you've done all of that planning. And I think that's where often we see people lagging behind, is in that continuity of operations part.
Absolutely. I wonder how many people really do take that document off the shelf, because that's what it does. It becomes shelfware. Once they do it and they stick it on the shelf and they don't really analyze it and put it into action, like you said, the after action plans, so that next year they're talking about different things, not the same thing year after year after year.
Correct.
So if you look at the future with the rise of emerging technologies like AI and IoT, how do you see the security landscape evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think organizations should start preparing for now?
It's getting better, but it's also getting a little more unwieldy, right? So you have to stay constantly on top of educating yourself and evaluating technologies. It's very easy to see new technologies coming along and saying, oh, that's great. This will help me tremendously, and just adapting that technology. The one thing I'll say about technology is a lot of great technologies coming along. We need to, every time something new comes out, we need to test it, but test it in different environments. Don't just adapt it because everybody else is using it. Just
Mhm.
because it's coming at us faster and faster doesn't mean we have to adapt it faster and faster. You adopt things when you are ready. And I will always emphasize when it comes to technology that two areas you've got to pay attention is policy development. Don't bring a new technology in that you don't have a policy for, and
Mhm.
privacy protections, because every new technology in the foreseeable future is going to expose you to some level of risk just by the nature of this technology coming in. Make sure you've protected yourself and protected privacy.
That must be a real challenge, particularly with, a fan experience. Having them order something from, get a ticket, and their preferences for what they have ordered over the last, I don't know if they're a season ticket holder, what they have ordered over the last is already in the database. And so it's kind of predictive analysis that they may probably order the same thing again. How does that, how do you, I guess, justify that with privacy?
Well, so all the programs that we use, much like all the programs that technology that most people use, are opt-in. You opt in, you decide, here's what we know we're offering, and you can opt in. And here's the privacy
Mhm.
policy, here's the accepted use policy. You read it, you review it, and you make a decision. You opt in, right? So you said, I know what you're doing. You've told me what you're doing. You have a privacy policy. That's why I said earlier, the things you have to keep in mind is policy and privacy. As long as you do those things and you're transparent, and the client or the customer decides they want to opt in, then it's a win-win for everybody. The client or the
Mhm.
customer gets more efficient and effective service, and you on your side, because you've done your homework, you have the robust policy, and you're protecting people's privacy, you can be more effective as a business.
And closing out, what advice would you give to leaders navigating complex risk landscapes in both public and private sectors?
Well, and the complex risk environment is just going to get more complex, right? Because all of the technologies that we're all looking at and we're all using for the good are all also being used for the bad, right? So it is a constant race, but the complex environment's only going to get more complex as we go along. Again, I
Mm.
think it comes back to leadership. When it comes to safety and security, the leadership has to be constantly planning for the worst and adapting for unexpected, because things are going to continue to get more and more complex as time goes on. And just be prepared to be resilient. Resilience is going to be the ultimate key as we go forward. Don't forget that a successful strategic plan includes, just beyond how do I make all the things I want to go off the way I want them, but how do I deal with every crisis that could come along and make sure that you can deal with those.
Yeah. And you said it, resilience, being
Yes,
able to have a plan and be able to execute on it if something goes wrong.
correct.
Expect the best, look for the best, but plan for the worst.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. And we look forward to hearing about what's going to go on in the NFL over the next few coming months. And we wish you a good Super Bowl and rest of the season for you. And do you have any final words for us?
I will, because you've been so kind and generous in having me on a show, I'll give you two teasers on the way out the door. Expect more Europe and expect more South America.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That's great. That's
All
great
right.
information.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you,
Thank
Joyce.
you
Nice to
very
see
much.
you.
Nice to see you too. And that ends it for Mission Critical. We thank Chief Cathy Lanier for her time and her knowledge today. And we look forward to your participating in future Mission Critical events. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Live long and prosper.